So we should probably just introduce ourselves, maybe. I'm Kevin Van Ord. I'm senior editor at GameSpot.
I'm Chuck Osborne, managing editor at IGN.
And I'm Rob Galbraith, and I was the editor-in-chief of the Wire.com and Revolution Report.
And there's a very loud panel over here.
Yeah.
But they're having a good time. I'm overwhelmed at the number of people that are here just to see the three of us.
What are you
just
doing here?
natter on.
Why?
Isn't there something
We're
better
not
that you could
big.
be doing?
Although it's funny, like we were talking about, like sort of our origin stories and getting into games journalism, and what's really interesting is part of my origin story is actually Chuck. Way back I was a big PC Gamer fan, and so I was a subscriber to PC Gamer, and one issue had in it a story about nude mods. Especially there was one relating to Max Payne that you would put in there, and there was also I don't know if it was this issue or if it was another one. There was a picture of Chuck sitting on a toilet. Reading a copy of PC Gamer. It was a different one, but still, I was a Chuck fan, and I had no idea that Chuck was actually gay, and so like I actually sent you a fan.
Wait, I'm gay? What?
That's what I heard anyway.
Oh, okay.
I sent you
it was
a
from
fan.
Grindr, I'm sure.
That's what it was, yeah. Right. So I actually sent you a fan email, and this would have been 2002, maybe 2003.
2002, 2003.
Yeah, somewhere around that time, and you actually responded to me. And at the time, I was just like a games fan. I loved PC games, and I loved PC Gamer, and I loved all of you, like you and Greg Viderman, and all these people that I loved. And you actually responded to me, and you used the word. You talked about your husband in the email, and it was the first, and it was important to me. First of all, because it was the first time I'd ever heard the word husband, a word I actually kind of despise now. But it was also important to me because it was the first time number one, your column acknowledged that people like me existed, because you talked about the mods, like certain mods being for the gals and 10% of guys. And that was the first time I remember in a game publication, like an acknowledgement that people like me existed. And then when you sent me the email, I was ecstatic because I had a crush and so on and so forth. It's like, oh, he's gay, and I was like, no. So yeah, that was my. So then the issues just kept coming, and I had a stack of issues. Like all the Chuck pages, like because you did like the first-person shooter column and so on. Yeah. So anyway, so that was actually my little Chuck story. So yeah.
And I had one fan. Okay, I will take exception with one thing, though. My partner is not a bear, and I can't imagine ever having referred to him as being my husband.
It happened.
But, okay.
It happened.
All right.
Because it was the first time I'd ever heard it. I don't have the email anymore, unfortunately. Like, it's lost in the ether, but that was a long time ago. But in internet years.
I am so flattered that you remember that story, and that I had anything to do with you possibly wanting to do this as a living.
It was a big deal for me, and the other thing that got me into it is that I loved Greg Kasavin's writing at GameSpot, and that's why I wanted to do what I do in terms of the writing part and in terms of the game part. But the part that made me feel like it was going to be okay to be gay and to write about games was you. And that was that's pretty special to me. So.
Thank you. That's awesome. I'm overwhelmed. So I've been writing about video games now for almost 15 years, and when I first got into the industry, I honestly thought that I was the only gay person who was in the industry. Of course, I now realize that that's not the case, and there's certainly been many, many more gay journalists to get into the gaming field. But at the time, especially because the very first magazine that I worked at was a magazine called PC Accelerator, and it was sort of like love child between PC Gamer and Maxim magazine, and lots of girl pics and body humor and stuff like that, and I enjoyed writing for it. But of course, I wasn't exactly the core demographic that it was aimed at. It's myself. Even though I enjoyed the magazine. And from there I went and I was at PC Gamer for 8 years. And then after that, I left, and I was did custom publishing for the same company. Launched a couple of magazines that you probably have never heard of, like Envision magazine. And At Gamer magazine, which is the official magazine for Best Buy. And then eventually I realized that print seemed to be dying out. And so now I'm at IGN.
Awesome. My name is Rob Galbraith, and I started off, well, I've always wanted to be a video game journalist. I've always loved video games ever since I was a kid. So once I finally got into the market, after I had gone to college and everything, got my degree, I had asked an old friend who was right around the area. His name was Bill Donahue, and he was from Ultra Game Players. He was in Jamestown, New York, and I'm from Buffalo, New York. So I was really interested in hearing, what he had to say. So eventually, he had told me to go onto the message board forums and just start posting. And I'm thinking, who's ever going to pick anybody off a message board forum? So I started doing it. And believe it or not, I started posting up reviews, and I had this one guy, Ian Micatel, who approached me and said, you know what, I've been reading all of your stuff, and I've had all the financial backing to start up a publication. So, okay, I'll try it on out. And I'm thinking, it's not going to be anything. And then when I started seeing 5 digits, 6 digits in terms of viewers, I'm like, wow, wait a minute. People are actually reading this. This is crazy. So it is really possible to get into the gaming industry just by constantly working, improving your work, constantly moving up with the reviews, checking yourself right afterwards, making sure that you know exactly what you're covering, and painting out a full picture for everything. I was the same way. I did not know anybody who was LGBT in the gaming industry. I had absolutely no idea. I knew that I had come out already, and what I would talk about in one of our podcasts, because I moved from there over to The Wire, one of the podcasts I had been speaking on, somebody mentioned something about equal rights and everything in video games. So I had gone on for a little bit about that. And it turned out that 2 or 3 days later, after that had come on out, I had this one guy from Tennessee. One of our members had no idea. He's in this small little farm town, and he could not come out because he didn't know who to talk to. And he was listening into that broadcast, and he said, wow, I really want to talk to somebody about that. And it was really cool because what's really nice about the gaming industry is that teens are heavily affected. I also work as a volunteer for a LGBT suicide service. And a lot of kids are affected by gaming. We hear about it on Xbox Live, PlayStation Network, even on PC games. Just, sometimes you hear homophobic things happen. So it was really nice just to be able to talk to this person, and eventually he did come out. So there is chances for change, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted this panel to get together, because there is potential for the industry to change and to evolve simply by being more accepting and being more understanding of the community. So
it can be really rewarding to get those little emails too. I'm certainly no stranger to getting plenty of hate every day based on my sexual orientation and comments. And even at GameSpot, I hardly am the one who has it worse. Carolyn Pettit, who is one of the best writers in gaming as far as I'm concerned, is transgender, and her columns are a cesspool underneath. And certainly I get it too, but not nearly to that extent. But those little emails that I get are worth it. People will send me stories about because I'm out and open, that they felt comfortable with coming out to their friends, or they will come to me asking for advice, like how do I talk to people, and so on and so forth, and they just want to know that it's safe, and that somebody out there cares and listens. It's certainly better than my Twitter feed being bombarded by which happens every so often. You give a negative review, and suddenly everybody hates you for being gay, because it's related. There's a Brazilian blogger. The site's Games Reflexos or something like that, and I gave a very negative review to Resident Evil 6, and this guy hated me so much for my review of Resident Evil 6 that he actually put together this effort with him and his fans to bombard my email and my Twitter feed and so on and so forth with just all this homophobic awfulness and nonsense. And it filled my email box, it filled my Twitter feed, and it was... You know, usually I try not to let this stuff affect me, but every so often my skin is thin enough where it starts to wear me down. And this was one of those moments where it really started to get to me. But the most interesting part, too, was when he linked to this article on some, psychological website somewhere where it's like gay people think differently than straight people. And so this must mean that clearly I have no idea what I'm talking about with Resident Evil 6. And, this game's just meant for men. And you don't understand the masculinity involved and so on and so forth. So it happens a lot more than I get the good stuff, as it turns out. But it's the good stuff that matters.
I think overall, or at least in my experience, it seems like the amount of homophobic bigotry has gone down, as the demographics have shifted over who's actually playing video games. The audience has matured a little bit. The one thing that I've seen that hasn't gone away has just been sexism. That's the one thing that's been really persistent is sexism against women. And I think like the women writers that we've had who have posted thoughts about feminism get it far worse than a lot of the gay writers that I've seen.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is I'll see this happen all the time where it's like you write one column in 50 that might be about something about social implications of either something gay related or something sexism related or something like that, and suddenly every comment is like, why are you always writing about this thing? It's all you talk about. You're just always talking about how you're gay, and it's just. I mean, all you have to do is read any Dragon's Crown reviews comments right now to understand why this is a problem. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend looking at Polygon's Dragon's Crown review in the comments. It's a fantastic review, but I wouldn't scroll down that page. So.
Community forums are accessible.
It is accessible, and actually, it's actually, I know you guys at least at IGN, and I don't know how involved you are with this, but I know that there's some effort into what you want to do with forums and comments.
Right.
And
Well, I mean, forum culture is just on the internet. It's terrible in general, and it's not limited to gamers at all. If you go to CNN or if you go to YouTube and you look at the comments, they are absolutely terrible. They bring about the worst in people when they're commenting on things. And so what we're trying to do at IGN is take more of a stand, not trying to censor exactly, but just trying to encourage people to contribute more positively to the conversation. And so we do have more moderators coming in now because we realize that, having all that negativity and badness in your forums, it drives people away. I mean, people don't want to come and see all that negativity. And so if we can create an environment where people are more welcome and encouraged to contribute in a more positive manner, then I think it's better for everybody.
If I had my way, reviews and articles like that would not have comments on them. And for the longest time at GameSpot, we did not have comments on reviews. And then that changed a couple of years ago. And I think if you ever read the Oatmeal comic, there's a really great comic that he did about how, sometimes it's okay for your work to be a rhetorical performance. And I think that it's okay for a review to be a rhetorical performance. I'm all about the conversation, but there are places for that. Yeah. And I don't know if right there on that page is where that conversation should be conducted.
Right. Yeah. We had the same thing over with our publications. It's always been a discussion whether or not you're going to put the comments on there or you're not going to put the comments on there. At one point, we finally settled to say, okay, here's a link to our message boards, and you can comment here, so you can stay off of it. But I think that. More often than not, if people are inclined to register onto sites, they're usually not as bad, or at least people who are regulars that come back. They're not as bad as the people who will only post once and they're going to say something very hateful, very nasty, sexist, homophobic, anything. it's, you know, it's
Most of the time with commenters or with letter writers back when I was in magazines, if you respond to somebody personally and actually, you know, let them know, hey, you're a real person and you read what they wrote, most of the time they're going to back down and apologize.
Everything changes in that
Yes.
one moment.
Yes,
They're
it
like,
does.
oh, but I didn't mean that. I didn't really mean it. It wasn't aimed at you per se. You know, so, you know, just because I called you nasty names it wasn't really about you. I was just, you know, my blood sugar was low. Should we, like, open up things up to questions and see if anybody has anything they want to ask us? Is there people hanging around with microphones, or you could just stand up and shout, I guess. Hey.
Sure, do you need a microphone?
I don't even know if we have one.
There's an extra one
Oh,
up
there,
there.
yeah.
So I guess if the goal is to kind of get in with your publication or the staff writer or freelance, what's the things you need to do, or like how do you put yourself in a position to do that?
So, can you say that one more time, just to make sure I understand the question properly?
I guess if your goal is to write for you guys, I mean, how would you put yourself in a position to do that? What are the things?
So how do you write for a publication like us? Well, it's interesting because all of us have our personal stories, and they're not always the same. But my story is somewhat like Rob's, in the sense that so number one is to take it. I mean, I think number one is to take it seriously. You know, and to just start doing it. There's so many possibilities. You know, you can go to GameSpot or IGN or Metacritic or wherever you want to go, and you can write right now. There's nothing keeping you from doing it. You can start your blog. You can do whatever. So start there. Just do it. And that's a good way to start honing the craft. And it's not just about the writing. It's about, you know, the critical evaluation and honing your critical skills. You know, number two is read a lot, because you really only best understand the rules of language and the way you can play with language by reading. And not just reviews, but everything. Read fiction, read nonfiction, read magazines, read bad stuff, read good stuff. I mean, Stephen King says it all best in his book on writing, so go buy that book and read it. It's fantastic. It's a really good, because it doesn't apply to just fiction. It applies to pretty much any kind of writing you want to do. You know, go and read that. He's got tons of advice, and a lot of that really stuck with me. But then in terms of like specifically getting into us, like for me, I very much like Rob. I visited the forums at GameSpot all the time. I posted all the time, and I was a nice person when I did it. And when you're a nice person in forums and you're just like a fairly decent, you know, writer and so on and so forth, they just started taking notice, and eventually I became a volunteer moderator. And then from there, I just started writing for fun. With a bunch of guys that were writing for a site called Inside Gamer Online, it was called at the time. And then that actually became a site called Gamer 2.0. Or no, it was called Amped IGO, and then Gamer 2.0, and then it just sort of fizzled somewhere along the way. But during that time, GameSpy got in contact with me and said, hey, would you be interested in freelancing? And I said, well, fuck yeah. So that was just, you know, hey, here's $100 per article. And my very first paid review was for a game called Crime Life Gang Wars for the Xbox. I don't know if anybody remembers this game. This was a game that featured Eminem's Posse, D12.
Right.
So my very first paid review was 1-star review for GameSpy, and thus started like a series of like my specialty at the time was all these handheld licensed games for like movies and stuff like that. So I reviewed like Monster House and Barnyard and all these animated movies that had game tie-ins. And the highest score I ever gave at GameSpy out of 5 stars was 3.5, to give you an idea of like the quality of stuff that was coming my way. But I was just thrilled to be writing. And then at some point, this would have been 2006, I got a call. I was living on the East Coast. I lived in Columbia, Maryland at the time. And I got a call from GameSpot saying, would you be interested in working for us? And the answer was very similar to the one I gave GameSpy when they asked me if I would freelance for them. So it was a big deal. Like I had a partner who couldn't leave because he had 3 children, and you know, it was to a city I'd never been to, and it was a big deal to change my life and move across the country. And so I took the chance, and I'm glad I did. because I love being at I love being at GameSpot in spite of all the ups and downs and the tribulations and Gerstmann Gate and so on and so forth. But I actually do love being there, and part of that is because I love the people that I'm with, and I just keep trying to grow, and you can't stop trying to hone that craft. Like, you got to keep, it's funny because I always thought it would be easier to start, like it would be easier to write the longer I did it. I thought, oh, well, eventually I'll just be able to shit out an article, every 2 hours. It would be great. It doesn't work that way. Oh, I spend so much more time now on every word I write than I ever used to, because I'm so afraid of doing something exactly like I did the day before and the day before that. And eventually you start, like, it's so easy to just rely on the same old tricks. Like, if I ever I have all these pet peeves about things I read in reviews. We all do. But like some of my least favorite stuff is like, well, when my managing editor brought the blah 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 game, stuck it on my desk, you can imagine how excited I was, or how scared I was, or how, like, there's just so many cliches, and like
that's a mixed bag.
Yeah, it is a mixed bag. Yeah, it's
those graphics are robust.
But it's pretty compelling all in all.
Like tomato sauce.
Yeah. So and it's fun because it's really easy to rely on those cliches because we all know them, and certain things just stop meaning something anymore. You use the same phrases long enough. It's like, I mean, even a word like gameplay. What does that mean? When you really, like, it's like, oh, the gameplay is really fun. What does that mean? Or the game looks really pretty, or the technology is amazing. What does that mean? And so I'm always trying to make sure, it's not, I can't just drop something like this and just have you assume that, oh, Kevin says the graphics are amazing. They must be amazing. I don't know what that means. I don't know what they actually look like. But so it's always a constant trick. It's like it's constantly like, don't rely on all those, those tricks and those cliches that we learned from back in the day and now constantly have to try to banish. And then when I see something crop up in my own, I'll read stuff I wrote last year and I'll think, I can't believe I wrote that. Those terrible words. What was I thinking?
I would say before you even get to the writing, though, make sure that you have the passion. Because get into games journalism, the one thing that you have to realize is that you're not going to get rich doing this. You're not going to make a lot of money. So that's my opening warning right there. You're not going to get bought off by companies. That is a fallacy. EA and Activision don't come and line our pockets trying to give us money to get good scores. That does not happen. It is an old wives' tale. So make sure that you have that passion, that you really, really want to do this, that you absolutely love games, and that you want to write about them for a living. Like Kevin said, just do it. There are so many outlets out there, blogging. You can even do YouTube videos, whatever. Just do it. Perseverance. Don't just do a couple, get discouraged and stop. Keep doing it. Whatever you do, don't stop. If you get criticized, take that criticism under advisement, but don't let it stop you. And when I first started, I actually had a very similar experience in a way, because I was going to the PCXL website, PC Accelerator, and at the time it was doing, its online games coverage wasn't traditional games coverage. It was sort of like parody stories similar to The Onion, so it was mostly satirical. And at the time I was in a dead-end job in Austin, Texas, and they advertised and said, hey, do any of you guys out there have any good stories to write? And so I kind of waited. I didn't do it at first, but somebody else submitted a couple of stories and they ran them, and they were absolutely terrible. And so I thought to myself, I can do better than that. And so I tried, and I sent them in, and I got posted. They asked me to do more. I did more. They got posted. And then eventually they said, hey, so we have this open assistant editor position. Do you think you might want to come and apply for it? And so I came up to South San Francisco, or Brisbane, which is where they were at the time. And I interviewed. And 2 weeks later, I moved to San Francisco. My very first time in San Francisco was when I moved to San Francisco. And I started the next day at the job. So it can happen.
That really is my story too.
Yeah.
Like, because my second time here outside of the job interview was moving, and the very next day, like I got here on at about 3 p.m. on Sunday, and I started the following day at like 8 o'clock in the morning. So fun times.
Advice that I would give out, if you are starting up on the message boards and you're looking to write and you're trying to do reviews and such, find another gamer who's never played that game before if you're doing a review, and ask them about the review. Now, what it is that since I was an editor for my publication, all of my writers would come to me and they would give me the article just before they sent it on out. And what I would do is make sure that I did not play the game until after I had read the review. And it would paint a picture for whatever the game is. And that's how you can really increase and improve your writing. That's an excellent way just to be able to paint the whole story. You need to include the music. You need to include the gameplay. You need to include controls, motions, everything. Absolutely everything. And consider that even though that you know what the game was like, you don't necessarily know what the other person is reading what you just wrote. They may not see exactly what you were referring to, a signifier and signified, really. It's just a matter of the way that you're writing it. It may be really good for you, and you might really know what you're talking about, but once you bring that on up to somebody else, they may not understand the story very well. And I think that's what made really good writers, just being able to find exactly what you wanted to write about. And another disclaimer, is especially if you want to get into the industry, yes, I got to play Smash Brothers Brawl a lot sooner before a lot of other people, but I also got to play a lot of other games, 1 star, 2 star, 1 star, 1 star. Yeah, so, you know.
And you're expected to finish them.
Yes, and you have to finish them. It's true. Yes, so every one of those things you see in the bargain bins, chances are we reviewed them.
It's a lot of fun being the RPG guy, because you get to play 50-hour terrible things all the way through for 50 hours. So yeah, and stuff like, well, I mean, we all have our different policies at our publications, but for us, you know, there are certain games you can't finish. You can't finish The Sims, you can't finish Madden, you can't finish an MMO per se, and so on and so forth. But we all have like, for us, we have to play at least 35 hours at an MMO before reviewing, and I typically play about 60, 65, 70 hours before you ever see an MMO review go up. So yeah, if it's bad, you gotta keep going. And it really is a job, by the way. It's like, it's awesome. You know, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes it is awesome. I get to play games for a living. But you know what? Like, if you like chocolate, would you like chocolate as much if you ate chocolate every goddamn meal every day? There are times where I was just like, fuck games, I gotta get out of here. And typically when I try to take a vacation, it's like the first thing is get the games out of there. The other downside too is, like, I play so many games for work that I don't play any game. Like, I don't play a lot of games for fun anymore,
right.
and that can really suck because, like, I really want to play The Last of Us, but when do I have time to play The Last of Us? I've played 2 hours of The Last of Us, and that's the most I've been able to get. I played an hour of Tomb Raider. There are all these great games that I want to be able to get to. I haven't had any time because I'm busy playing, I don't know, some stupid thing instead. But I'm too busy playing Dark for.
So really, we're the real victims here.
Yeah. Woe is us. Oh no. But and deadlines can be tough. I mean, there are times where you know we want to get that review up. Say, you know, the embargo's on Tuesday. Embargo meaning, like, this is the earliest time we can put up this based on, you know, you give us review code, and in return we say, okay, well, we won't post our review until so and so time. So but the thing is, okay, so you're giving us the code on Friday for your 30-hour game, and we're going to try to post this review on Tuesday morning. Sure, that'll go really well. So it does turn into long nights, long weekends, and you ultimately, you know, do pay a price eventually in terms of the, you know, you don't get to spend as much time with your loved ones as you want to, and so on and so forth. It's, you know, it's certainly not in any range like the kind of crunch developers have to go through. That's in a league of its own. But there is still there is still sacrifice that you have to make in terms of time and
Okay, show
and
of
people.
hands. Who wants to be a game journalist? Okay, we scared you all out.
I think you had something you wanted to ask.
I'd like to ask a question. So you guys have been in the industry reviewing and looking at a lot of games over a reasonable arc of time. And I'm curious what you guys think about, I'm curious what you guys think about, and I know it's a broad term, innovation. You always hear, especially in the AAA titles, that there's no innovation happening, the indie scene is where it's at, etc. But since you guys have reviewed so many games over an arc of time, is that really true, or is it just people being myopic whenever they throw that term around?
That is such a huge question that we could spend hours and hours and hours on that alone. I think it depends. I think sometimes I think that we use innovation as this sort of holy grail of what we're supposed to be aspiring to, and I don't think that's always the case. I actually think that there are other important things that games can be. I think that variety is more of a holy grail than innovation is. A game that feels different from one moment to the next can certainly be more exciting than a game that tries something new and is boring. And I think that boring is much worse than being bad in a certain respect.
Yeah, I think most AAA manufacturers, they have it over the indies as far as technological innovation goes, but when it comes to true creativity, trying to find that one big idea, that's where the indie scene has it. The Last of Us is an amazing achievement technologically, maybe storytelling wise as well, but there's these little games like a Katamari Damacy that comes out of nowhere that just has this one really compelling idea, and of course then you build a franchise around that. But
well, and I mean my Twitter feed was, most of the games people talk about, like when they go back, like everybody's like, oh, The Last of Us is fantastic, but then a few days later everybody's back to talking about FTL, or everybody's back to talking about oh gosh, suddenly I forgot the name of that fantastic turn-based strategy. Anyway, so everybody's back to talking about these little games that I shouldn't even say little games, because that's a bit of a misnomer, but all these like really fantastic innovative games that keep you coming back. And but I also want to be fair, because I think there's a lot more originality in the so-called AAA space than we actually give them credit for a lot of the time as well. I think there are really good ideas in that space too, and I look at, like, one of my favorite developers is Ubisoft Montreal, because they continually seem to do things. I think they hit a really good, because big publishers are risk averse, right? They don't want to spend a lot of money on something you're not going to buy. But I think Ubisoft in general has hit this good space where they're going to put a lot of money into something that's a little bit risky, but not so risky enough that we're not going to buy it. And so we get interesting looking and interesting sounding games like The Division, or and things like that actually look pretty interesting and different, but aren't so different as to scare away the mainstream customer. So
In terms of innovation, the entire industry has been fueled on it since the beginning. Because we've improved graphics, then we added, instead of 2 controllers, we added 4 controllers, then we added rumble packs, and we added online. That was just the hardware aspect of things, not even simply the software and being able to play the game. It's such a loaded topic for innovation. What is really innovating the game? And the thing is that it is possible to go too far with a game. You can take a game and then take it completely out of a character's zone, the comfort zone, and then the game's crap. So it really depends. There's a lot of balancing that's involved with innovation. So you could be going one way, you could be going the other. I guess it really depends on what people enjoy playing, and that's why innovation is. It's so loaded. I just can't.
yeah,
I don't know.
I'm kind of reminded when you're talking about that of EA's Majestic. I think that's
Yeah.
the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where it was a game that actually played you, where you were you would receive emails and faxes from the game, and so. Yeah, you weren't actually playing the game. It was more playing you. It was an interesting concept. Totally failed.
yeah. So, and again, I think innovation is another one of those sort of meaningless, without context words. What does it really mean to be innovative? That can actually mean something. It's like the word fun or something like that. Like that means something different for me than it might be for him and for him and so on. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you have to consider all of the different gamers that are out there. I mean, when you consider an MMO, there's a lot of grinding in that. And not everybody likes grinding. I mean, people that, if you want to do a puzzle game or something like that, you don't want to sit there all day long playing the same thing over and over.
He said grinding, not grindering. All right.
Yes.
Get your heads out of the gutter.
See, and what's funny, for something that's grinding for you might be actually relatively interesting to me as an MMO player. So
Exactly.
my definition of what becomes grind, which to me is gameplay without context. It's just game. It's basically just activity for the sake of activity rather than activity for the sake of moving forward. So so to me that like when people talk about the original Assassin's Creed being repetitive, I was like I never once felt like I was that I was bored by that. Like I guess in one sense yes, it's repetitive because I'm doing the same things, but it didn't feel repetitive. So again they're ultimately you can. When I write stuff, I don't necessarily know what you're going to think or you're going to think or somebody else is going to think, but I know what I think. And that's really the best I can do, because the more you try to second guess what somebody else is going to think, the more you're not really doing what you need to do as a critic, because the more, I don't know what, internet person 1,228,000, so whoever is going to think, but I know what I think, and I can just hope that what I communicate is good enough or interesting enough that you get something out of that.
So I'm like sort of like an indie developer. So I assume you guys get a million billion horrible emails from terrible indie developers every day, and they're like, "Hey, look at my game, please."
Yes. Why, yes, we do.
So what is like the least obnoxious way to go about that from your perspective? Like, that's not going to piss you off the most.
Don't use the word Kickstarter in the first 3 paragraphs at least. No, I mean, because a lot of people think that the best way to get interest in their game is to talk about how you're going to be selling your game or that kind of thing. I'm much more interested in the product that you have. I don't care about Kickstarter. That's not fair to say, but like when it comes to you telling me about how cool your game is, send it with like a YouTube link of your of like a little trailer you've put together, or that kind of thing is much more interesting. Don't be afraid to use casual language or something. Like I read stuff all the time that's like, this sounds just like every other email that I get, but the stuff that I pay attention to is like, bam, pay attention to this. And sometimes you can't help but pay attention to people that are, think a little bit differently. Or
So you're saying like, be quirky but flashy.
maybe. There's, we get press emails all the time from like major folks that are in PR, and there are a couple PR people that I really like. Aubrey is one of those people.
Really?
Yeah, Aubrey Norris is one of those people. Now, Aubrey is like a kind of love it or hate it kind of thing when you get an email from Aubrey, because she's just upfront. Like, her emails can be laced with profanity. It'll have like the email she sent about Saints Row recently had I think an ASCII dick in it. I'm not saying send ASCII dicks and that's the best way to get my attention. It can help. But that's the kind of thing, like, love it or hate it, I'm going to remember an email from Aubrey. And so that's the kind of thing. I mean, it might be a different kind of attitude or a different kind of take, but I'll notice that even if we don't end up covering your game, like, we don't typically cover iPhone games, for example. So typically when I get something about, hey, our thing, for iPhone is about to come out, that's usually going to be something that I immediately pass over because we don't cover that game. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to link to it, like link to your YouTube video on Twitter, because I'll do that all the time. Or I'll just, because I think it looks cool, like I'll put it on Facebook. Like, somebody sent me this really cool looking papercraft iPhone game that I thought looked so cool. I was like, I'm going to tell people about this game. We're not going to cover it because we don't cover this kind of product. But I think it's cool, and maybe 10 people, ended up buying the game that wouldn't have bought the game before. So, just be you, and don't don't worry so hard about like you're saying exactly the right things. Just, you know, I don't like press speak, I guess.
Yeah.
So it just gets old. Like I've heard all the same promises over and over again and all the same sentences over and over again. So just, you know, say, hey, we think our game's cool and here's some stuff about it.
At the same time, I would say, you know, at least try to make it look a little professional.
Well, yeah.
Because
Not everybody could do ask
because
pics.
sometimes we do get like emails that are just, it's like one line, hey, check out my game, no punctuation, all lower cap, and it's like, really, you know, if I can't take your email seriously, then I'm not going to take your game seriously. You know, enough to check it out. Also, you know, make sure that you're contacting the right people. Like, for example, at IGN, we have a previews editor, we have a reviews editor, and then we have channel editors for the different platforms. You know, make sure that the right people are getting, you know, your email.
And have substance with anything that you send on out, because you know there are some people just like that email. I had this other one that was really well written. I mean, just amazing. Like the everything that they had written down there was something that I really enjoyed, and I wanted to write something up, but they had nothing to back it up. You know, there was no like footage, there was no content. They were trying to announce things and they were trying to hype things way too early before they had really structured anything or developed any of the characters or any of that for that matter. So you do get those emails where it's just like, hey, look forward to my game that's going to come out in 3 or 4 more years. Like, okay. Sure.
And another thing, if you're one of those indie folks trying to get attention for your game, pay mind of like what the release schedule is, because it's really hard for us to pay attention to a smaller game when 7 major titles are all coming out in the same 2-week period. But if there's a lull, if there's like 3 weeks where no major games are coming out, that's the time. Like, because we want to create content, because I mean, it's one, like, I always feel like our responsibilities as content creators is multifold, but one is we want to create things that we think people are going to consume. I mean, that's why you see a bunch of Call of Duty stories and a bunch of Assassin's Creed stories, because people consume that stuff because you're interested in that game, and so we create things because we think you're going to read it. But I think we also have a responsibility to bring things to your attention that you may not have known about, like this little game. You know, like I know several of us on staff are fans of an upcoming game called Gone Home. And so, you know, we think of ourselves like, hey, we think this game sounds really cool, so we want to tell you about it. And that lull is the perfect time. If you think you've actually got something cool to share with us, that's the perfect time, you know, or send your review code then. I mean, sometimes people are like, why didn't you review our games? Well, did you contact us? Tell it, you know. We try to make sure we know all of the games that exist all of the time on every platform, but it's impossible. You know, ultimately, like, sometimes I don't know that a game exists until you bring attention to it. So don't be afraid.
November of this year is going to be a little busy.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.